Do you ever feel like your horse just isn't listening? Like you're asking clearly and they're either ignoring you or doing something completely different? Most people think that's a training problem. It's not. It's a communication problem. We've been taught that horses are being disrespectful, being stubborn, testing us, but horses aren't doing anything to us. They're responding to what they don't understand or what makes them fearful or uncomfortable. And because we've been told that horses are stubborn, they're testing us, we need to show them who's boss. Oh, yeah, and they have small brains, that we tend to take the things that they do personally. For most of us, it was indoctrinated at a young age or at an early stage of your journey with horses, right? Somebody said, don't let the horse do that to you. Don't let the horse test you like that. So now, when we have an issue with our horse, we assume that it's a personal attack. And it's not. Horses don't have small brains, like a lot of us were told. Their brains are just arranged differently than ours. When you think about how a horse learns, think about how a small child or a toddler learns. If you've ever been around a toddler, you know this. They're not trying to be difficult. They're trying to figure things out. They need things to be simple, clear, and safe, just like a horse. The problem is we don't speak horse, and we expect horses to understand us perfectly, while we misunderstand them constantly. So, in this episode, we're going to talk about how to start communicating with your horse more effectively. We're going to talk about why taking things personally is shutting that communication down, and how simplifying your conversation can uplevel your training. Welcome, friends and fellow horse fiends. I'm Anna Fox of Equus Enlightened, and this is the Thinking Horse and Rider, the podcast dedicated to training you to become the best possible partner for your horse. Here, we explore the science and soul of horsemanship. We dive into equine behavior, the psychology of partnership, and compassionate training methods that help you become a thinking rider who creates a thinking horse. Because when you understand how your horse's mind works and show up with empathy and presence, everything gets easier and a whole lot more fun. My goal is to keep riding easy and fun for everyone, while helping you deepen your connection, find more flow, and maybe even create your own unicorn along the way. Whether you're working on dressage movements or just trying to understand why your horse did that thing they did, we'll explore the research, the real talk, and the small shifts that make a big difference in and out of the saddle. So grab your boots, take a deep breath. What are you waiting for? Come ride with me. Normally, in your very first riding lessons, you are taught to tell the horse what to do. Have you ever tried that with a toddler? It is possible to have shared communication with your horse. It takes some patience and awareness on your part, and you may not be accustomed to slowing down and using a level of awareness that you need to. I'm a firm believer that that sense of feel, many riders think is elusive, something that you're born with, something that's just a talent you have, is nothing more than being able to feel what your horse's input is. And some people have that and they're conscious of it, and some people have it and they aren't conscious of it. It doesn't matter. Some people can communicate with animals easier than others. I do believe that. But how do you start if it's not something that is innate to you? First, we have to recognize that horses aren't trying to do anything, but they're trying to understand what the heck we want. Because in the grand scheme of things, they really want us to be happy. If you remember last episode, we talked about how horses like happy relationships. They are social. They love relationships. They want things to be happy and have good relationships. So if you think about that toddler again, They might be difficult at times. It's usually when their situation is not optimal. They're tired, they're hungry, they're confused, they don't feel safe because they're trying to understand the world while they feel safe. And they're trying to make sense of what's being asked. And they are just in the beginning stages of understanding the human language. And they also prefer that what we ask them to do is fun, which is also exactly like horses. So when your horse speeds up, braces, ignores your leg, that's not personal. It's a nervous system going. I don't understand this, or I don't feel okay about this. They might be unbalanced or distracted or just unsure of what they're supposed to do. You wouldn't assume a toddler is disrespecting you, but we assume that about horses all of the time. I believe it goes back to the stories and emotions that we like to tie to our horses that aren't always accurate. And with our own human children, we tend to stay more objective. They're overwhelmed, they're tired, it was too much too fast, they're hangry, right? But with horses, always being lazy, she's ignoring me, he's testing me, she doesn't like me. We extend a sense of curiosity to toddlers and judgment to our horses. This goes back to our second episode in the series with Elaine Hayes when we talked about awareness without judgment. Because sometimes our horses have mental, emotional reasons for doing what they do. Sometimes they're physical reasons. It's hard to figure out what is mental and emotional or physical if you're always creating a story around it. So you need to be aware of it. You need to notice it, but not create a story, not place a judgment on what you notice. I often tell my students that you have to be the adult in the relationship. As the human, we must stay grounded and assess the situation without our emotions to start noticing clues and experimenting with an answer. If you're struggling with something with your horse, experiment, play around. Don't get caught in the should trap, which we're going to talk about a little later. Just change one thing and see what happens. If you've ever lived or worked with children, with toddlers especially, you have probably done this, and you might not have even been consciously aware of it. For instance, if you take a toddler to a new place, you don't just do it blindly without any explanation, plop them down in the middle of a room and say, have at it. You're probably going to get a really clingy kid if you do that. Or let's say you take them somewhere like the doctor's office. You're going to explain to them where you're going, what you're doing, why they're there. And then the doctor doesn't just come in and start poking and prodding and looking everywhere and not telling the child what they're doing. The doctor's going to introduce themselves, explain the process to the kids. Then they're going to ask if they can do something. And then after they do that thing, they're going to check in and then they're going to ask if they can do something else and then they're going to check back in. Working with your horse is exactly the same. In the beginning, when you're learning this process, you're going to think that it's slowing you down and you're not going to like it. But once you learn, once you make this a habit, it's seamless and it doesn't slow you down. It actually gets you where you want to go much faster. You just have to trust the process. So again, think about that doctor's exam and asking a question, may I do this? Doing the thing, getting the result, checking back in, asking again. Rinse, repeat. And then think about the rando things that you expect your horses to be completely okay with no understanding, no explanation, no nothing. And you want to get on and tell them to do things. I believe that communication starts before you ask them to do anything. There has to be a preparation period There has to be a period when you are explaining, even if it's in your head, what's going to happen next. And that really starts with you being aware of what you are asking and why. Because a lot of people fall into that should trap. And the should trap is something that we learn early on in our writing lessons too. You should walk, trot, canter every day. You should practice this. You should practice that. You should not do this. You should not let your horse do that, right? But if you're helping a toddler learn something, you don't just repeat instructions over and over that they don't understand. You don't say, well, they should be running by now. You adjust, you simplify, you explain. You give them space and time to figure out how to run after they finally learn how to walk. But with horses, people skip that and just follow the rules. And I don't even know what these rules are. They seem to just be an arbitrary set of thoughts and feelings that were passed down from one horse person to another over a period of I don't know how long with no discernible logic. Like, why do you have to canter every day? Who cares? I don't know. So if you don't understand what you're asking, your horse definitely doesn't. I ask my students a lot of questions, like why and how does that feel? What are you feeling? It's quite funny because normally people will, when I say, how does it feel? They will tell me all about how they think it felt for the horse or, the little nuances in what they felt their horse doing. They don't often tell me how it made them feel, which is really what I usually want to know because I want to know, did that feel good to you or not? Because usually if it feels good to you, it's right. But we're taught not to trust that because we should be doing XYZ. Many times when students first meet me, they can't answer these questions. I get a lot of blank stares because most people have never been asked these questions. They've just been told what they should do. So if you ask yourself why, if you're having a hard time doing something with your horse, first ask, why am I doing this? If the answer is simply because someone said so, that's not a reason. So rethink that and come up with a better one or find something else to do. We tend to use that reason a lot for toddlers when we're in kind of a hotbed situation and we need them to do something right now without us having to give any explanation. And in fact, this is a valuable skill to teach your kids and your horses in an emergency situation. One time a year, one time every 6 months. I don't know. But in a quick emergency situation, with kids, if you have to do this, you generally go back and explain to them later why you did this. With horses, it's a lot easier to teach them. And also with children, I find, if you've taught them early on that if I say this or I do this or my body language says this, I need you to do this right now. Don't ask a question. It's right now. You can teach your horse the same thing, but that's not how you want to train them every single day. Every day, you want to have a dialogue. You want to be able to go back and forth. How does this feel to you? Is this easy? Is this hard? Do you understand? Because I said so is not the type of relationship that anyone wants to be in. So why do you expect that of your horse? It's usually because someone told you you should. And then we end up with the next problem, which is asking too much at once. We usually ask too much at once because we've been told that we should be doing XYZ, so we ask for XYZ all at the same time, and then that's confusing. You wouldn't teach the toddler how to write while they're running, while they're balancing on a balance beam and memorizing their multiplication tables. We teach them how to write first. Actually, they learn to run first, right? They learn to crawl, walk, run generally. They learn to balance themselves. That's how they learn to stand. Then we teach them how to write. Then a little later down the line, we can work on the multiplication tables. But write while running, while balancing, while memorizing is exactly what we ask our horses to do every day. As toddlers, we break things into tiny pieces, and then we celebrate that smallest try or that smallest win. And essentially, that's how horses learn the best too. Over the weekend, I had a student who saw this beautiful video of a Liberty exercise she wanted to try with her horse. And when I see the video, I know the components that are needed to create this picture and to make this exercise work. I also know what components might be a struggle for my student and her horse. So I knew it wasn't going to be perfect, but why not try it anyway? Trying this exercise gives her the power of seeing what needs work. I can also take time now to explain those components, and she can clearly see where those components fit in. And then I can show her how you can work on these components on their own before you try to tie them together again. If we had done this experiment and when it didn't go perfectly, we created a story about how the horse just didn't want to do it, how he wasn't listening, he was being disobedient, difficult, we'd be stuck. Where do you go from there? Like, ask harder? The horse doesn't understand. Or if you meet someone who speaks a foreign language and you try talking louder to them, they're still not going to understand you. Doesn't matter how loud you talk, you're not speaking the same language. If you keep an open sense of curiosity and a sense of what would make this easier, how could I explain this to a toddler? You have a place to go. And you're not automatically assuming that your horse is being difficult. When you assume your horse is being difficult, that brings you into the personalization trap, where now you think that your horse is doing it to you on purpose. When you see a toddler having a meltdown in a store, do you think to yourself, wow, they're really disrespecting that parent today? No, usually your first thought is, well, I wonder what made them angry, or something along those lines. But when a horse reacts, suddenly it's about us and our feelings. In fact, we revert to our toddler brain and become emotional, have that tantrum, instead of being curious and asking questions. If you ever have had a toddler in a tantrum and tried to divert them with curiosity, it's a tough row to hoe. Once they've put that emotional wall up, it's really hard to get through. Same thing with a horse. And most people aren't even aware of this problem because it was so ingrained in us from the beginning. It was these thoughts and feelings that were passed down from another horse person, right? We were kind of taught that we are entitled to certain things from our horses because we feed them, we house them, we take care of them. I really want you to sit with that thought for a second and ask yourself to notice when you might feel that way in the future. Because that one simple belief changes how you show up, whether you realize it or not. If you feel like you have a sense of entitlement because your horse has an easy life, because you take care of everything, if you feel like you have a sense of entitlement because you saved your horse from something or you give them all these things, it makes you less curious. It makes you less patient. It makes you less willing and more likely to think, my horse should just do this because I want it to. And in that moment, you stop communicating, you stop asking questions, and you start expecting something, and then you take it personally when your horse doesn't deliver. Remember, your horse isn't against you. They're trying to figure things out with you. you can show them that same courtesy. If you're thinking, why is my horse ignoring me? Probably they don't understand. And you've likely been asking for too much too often. Why won't your horse do what you ask? Because it either doesn't make sense or it feels like too much. How do I get respect? You don't demand respect. Certainly don't demand one from a toddler. You build trust through clarity. How do I fix this? Break it down into tiny pieces that you and your horse can understand. Riding or just working with horses is not about control. It's about education, and level of care does not equal clarity. Just because you fed your horse that day does not mean they can suddenly read your mind. Horses and toddlers learn best through low pressure, short bouts of repetition, a playful mindset, and clear instruction. If there's too much pressure, they're going to shut down or push back. Too much repetition, they're going to shut down. They need consistent, simple patterns, not constant change and chaos, and not repetition into boredom. Play and variety is a part of that, not drilling things endlessly. An engaged horse beats a forced horse every time. The easiest way to get engagement from your horse is to ask a simple question, pause, see, feel the answer, evaluate the answer, and then ask again. In the beginning, this may indeed slow down your sessions, but it's not going backwards. It's not regression. It's actually a progression of your communication skills. And once this line of question and answer becomes a habit, you'll do it seamlessly and quickly. When tasks get harder or you're working with a different horse, you'll slow down again. That's okay. You're learning. You're in a mode of intaking information. If you're disciplined in this practice, you'll quickly learn that that engaged horse is so much more cooperative than a beat down or bored or confused horse. Early childhood education is much the same. You make a clear ask, you give them space to respond, and you acknowledge when they try, not just when they've completed the entire operation. And you don't give constant correction. You don't stack pressures. You don't give them another task on top of the one you just asked. The constant correction thing is your inner perfectionist control freak coming out. Sorry, not sorry. Stop it. It's a hard habit to break. Ask me how I know. So just admit it now and start breaking the habit, because awareness is the first step. Notice, why do you do the things you do? Luckily for us, our horses aren't judgy. So you can practice not being perfect on them. Often when you're struggling, it's because you're making things too difficult and asking for too many things at once. If something isn't working, go simpler. If a toddler can't do something, you don't push them harder and automatically assume they're stupid or being difficult. You break it down into smaller pieces. Horses don't need more pressure either. They need more understanding. We really talked about that in the last few episodes. And we talked about how listening to your horse isn't that hard. You just need to slow down and trust yourself a little more. Hear what your gut is telling you. See the picture you get in your mind when you ask a question. Whatever comes in that moment of pause, lean into it. Think about it for a moment. Decide whether that's what you wanted or not. For now, just practice those first steps because they are hard, especially when you haven't been doing them. Once you can do them easily, repeatedly, without having to remind yourself, Then you can start thinking about how you can adjust your asks to the answers you are getting. And whether you need to experiment with a different ask or increase your energy in the ask, whatever. So this week's 10-minute experiment, and I know we haven't done one in a while because I forget when I have guests on the show. Sorry about that, is to pick one thing that you do with your horse automatically every day. And instead of just doing it, ask your horse if you can do it. Might be putting on the halter, might be putting on the bridle, the saddle pad, boots, picking their feet, whatever it is. What do you notice when you approach it with the ask? May I have your foot? May I put this bridle on you? How do you feel about the saddle pad? How do you feel about these galloping boots? What do you notice? And if you notice that your horse says no, can you accept that? How does that no make you feel? I've got a great short video you can watch on YouTube that shows me doing this experiment with a horse and a fly mask. I will link it in the show notes in case you need a little inspiration or a little guidance. I know some of us like to see things in action before we try them. And if this is resonating with you and you're thinking you need a new way forward with your horse, but you're finding it all a little bit difficult to grasp in podcast form, you can check out my online course, Reconnect, Rebuild, and Ride with Heart. You can still get it for the introductory price if you join our free school community, the Happy Horse and Rider Lab. I'll link that in the show notes too. Or you can just check it all out on my website, equisenlightened.com. When you start seeing your horse as a being to have a conversation with and not as something to manage or fix or teach, you realize that the conversation isn't happening in the big moments. It's happening in the small, everyday things. The things we do without thinking. The things we assume are just part of the routine. And those are the places where your horse has the most to say, if you're willing to listen. Remember, your horse is communicating with you all of the time. If you start seeing them less like something to control and more like something to guide and educate, everything changes. We spend so much time trying to fix the big problems and completely miss the conversations happening in the small moments. And honestly, that is where the real answers are. Horses aren't being difficult, they're being developmental. They're learning to live in our domestic world. All right, horse fiends, thanks for hanging out with us today. If this episode got your gears turning, don't forget to check out Reconnect, Rebuild, and Ride with Heart. The links are in the show notes. It's the program that'll take everything we talked about here and actually help you apply it in real life with your horse. And hey, before you ride off, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a quick rating or review of the show. It helps more riders like you find us and keep these conversations going. All the links you need are waiting in the show notes. Happy riding!